Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Well, reactions are still trailing last Friday's disruption of an interview here on Arise with a former Rivers State Commissioner for Employment Generation and Empowerment by suspected political thugs in Port Harcourt, Rivers State. Well, he joins us now to share his experience with that and how this incident might become another stumbling block in the way of current efforts to resolve outstanding issues in the state ahead of what promises to be an eventful electoral cycle. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on the morning show.
Thank you, Timitokwe, for having me.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Nwibubasa. Good to have you on the morning show. I hope I got your name correctly.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's start.
Nwibubasa.
Nwibubasa.
Okay.
That's
Dr.
correct.
Nwibubasa. So can you tell us a bit more, about this attack and what could have motivated it?
Well, again, it is sad to state that Rivers State is still in the vicious circle of repeated attacks on dissenting opinions when it comes to politics. And what happened 2 nights ago is not something we will wish will happen to anyone else, because it took only a little miracle to keep myself and the reporter who was conducting that process with me alive. What we saw was amazing. The level of intensity in search of us and the weapons that they wielded was a clear indication that these assailants were ready to kill, to maim, and to destroy. And they were not silent about where their loyalty lies. They said it very clearly that they were doing this to defend the image of a political leader, their political leader, the FCT minister. They made it very clear that I have been consistent over the years in criticizing the methods and, of course, the activities of the FCT minister. Right back the days in the PDP when I was spokesman for Atiku Campaign Council. Of course, you are aware, Governor Wike then declared me wanted prior to that election. So it is obvious that Governor Wike has infused into all his followers animosity and enmity towards my person. And that is something that the Nigerian people and the security agencies must take note of. And so what happened was barbaric, very uncivilized. First, they started chanting from the background. So if you listen to the clip of that interview, you discover that towards the end, when this interview was abruptly interrupted, I was already a bit distracted because there was so much noise at the background. Of course, the Arise correspondent that was with me, very experienced young man, who quickly stopped the interview and went to them to interact with them and persuade them and explained that he was the same one who covered the minister's activity that same day, and that the minister's activity was going to go on air, and all that Arise was doing was to balance the story, to hear from other people in Rivers State how they feel about what the minister was doing. All efforts to plead fell on deaf ears, as this young man, who we have later discovered he is one honorable, honest, has made calls, bringing in talks with guns and raided the hotel. At that point, because we were on the first floor when they came in, we quickly moved away from the point where the interview was being conducted and looked for the safest place to hide. Of course, even though if the hotel staff has even known where we were hiding, they will give us away, because they were now at gunpoint and they were asking them to point to where we were being hidden. Of course, when they didn't know, because they didn't know where we were hiding, they started conducting search from room to room, breaking hotels' doors into the rooms where there were guests, and also carted away with properties of the guests that were in that hotel. This harrowing experience continued for about 1 hour before the police eventually came to our aid and extracted us from that tense environment. This was not just an action that was instantaneous. It seemed quite premeditated, well orchestrated, and had a sponsorship in the man in whose name they were chanting at that point. And so it is clear that Nigerians must address the FCT minister and his language and his stirring of drum of war, because if their leader is not speaking in such terms of aggression, their followers will not take the same path.
All right, Dr. Nwibubasa, thanks for the clarity that you have brought into the subject matter, because everybody watched that interview on Friday on Arise, and you know, many people were quite worried, given, you know, the picture that you painted, the noise in the background and everything. Now, what steps have you taken? Because these are strong allegations. What steps have you taken to report the matter appropriately, you know, to the police, and maybe to take the matter to the court? And then personally, given what has happened on Friday, do you feel safe in Rivers State, particularly in Port Harcourt at this point? That is where you live, that is where you conduct your businesses. Do you feel safe there?
Well, let me state it quite clearly that first, when we are extracted from the scene of this incident, we moved to the nearest police station under instruction of the Commissioner of Police to issue our statement, and that statement is written, and the DPO of that station that is within that division that has jurisdiction, we have given that statement. Of course, I've been in touch with the DPO even up till this morning, and one question I asked him this morning is, have you made any arrest, especially because you have recovered the camera of the Arise news that was collected, and how did you recover the camera? And he said they had information that the camera was dumped at a particular point, and then they traced to the point where the camera was dumped. And I've told him clearly that, look, the individual that raised the awareness and invited assailants to kill us at that very point is well known, and that his name is Honorable Ernest, and he lives in that community. And so I will not be glad that in the next 24 hours he has not been arrested by the police for questioning. These are some of the steps I have taken. Of course, I've also taken steps with other political leaders in Rivers State, who, of course, has reached the police in other quarters, you know, and put pressure to ensure that we get to the IG, to also put pressure on the Commissioner of Police, who, of course, was aware. Expectations were that I called the police hotline. The Arise News called the police hotline. Several spirited individuals that we reached out to while we were in hiding also called the police. The Rivers State Police Command, up till this moment, had not issued a statement on such attempt at the life of one who has served Rivers State, not just as a commissioner, but as a member of the Nigerian Medical Association, where I have served in Rivers State in various capacity as a private practitioner and an entrepreneur that has created jobs through so many activities in Rivers State. So I expected that as at today, the Commissioner of Police would have come out with a statement issuing that this occurred and this is what they are doing. That has not been done. So this goes a long way to tell us that the police and the political class, in a way, is colluding, you know, to keep information away, because there's somebody that is influencing that. And we must be clear about it. I am not saying this because of my hatred for Wike. I'm not saying this because I have a problem with him. Yes, I do not agree with him politically. But at the same time, going as far of infusing hatred and animosity into his followers against me, this This is not the first time. It's not the second time. And we keep watching until what happens. So the police must do more. The Rivers Liberation Movement, which I lead in Rivers State, tomorrow we issue a statement and also send a letter to the Commissioner of Police. The truth is, every criminal activity that occurs against an individual is a matter of the state. It is the police that prosecute criminal activities. It will be difficult for me to just go to court because this is not a civil matter. So I can't approach the court except the police does their due diligence, arrest the assailants, and bring them to a book, and then let them come and explain before the court why they took such premeditated action against my life. Let me state this. The young man in question came to greet me when I was sitting at the reception of the hotel waiting for the camera setup. And so it means that he was already aware the reason I was sitting in the place and has made his calculated attempt. There was no way that instantaneously he would have been able to mobilize the number of people and weaponry that came into that environment, except that it was premeditated and he was targeting at the right time when they would take up this action. It is also important that because a correspondent and a staff of Arise was involved, the Arise on their own must also take steps to also talk with security agencies to protect their own. And this is important both on our own side and on the side of Arise.
Now, we've heard you, and we'll certainly take all what you've said into consideration. But then I'm wondering, if this goes unchallenged, what sort of danger does this portend for Nigeria's democracy, especially as we move towards the 2027 general election?
What the question you've asked already have an answer. Let me take you back to 2023. The then Governor Nwike, now FCT minister, started by creating a lot of dissensions in PDP, having lost out of the presidential primaries, and then created a whole lot of issues in Rivers State such that the then presidential candidate of the PDP, Atiku Abubakar, could not come to Rivers State to campaign. You are aware of the level of brutality that was meted on Atiku's followers, how our secretariat, our campaign secretariat was shut down. You are aware how campaign billboards and posters were destroyed. This is how it starts. The same thing is starting. Rivers State is becoming a boiling point way ahead of the 2027 election. Of course, you are aware that there is no love lost between him and his successor, Governor Sim Fubara. And of course, the both camps have started throwing tantrums, beating drums of war. And of course, the ADC is gearing up in our activities to inform Rivers State that a new party is in town and that we need to change the face of leadership in Rivers State. Look at these three forces that will be contending for power in Rivers State. And if, as at today, we cannot tolerate each other, speak on issues and not attacking personalities, speak on issues and programs and not beating drums of war of who has more power and who does not have, of course, you will see that Rivers State will definitely degenerate. And that's why this issue is not just a matter of Rivers State. It's a matter of the corporate Nigerian society, the press, the civil society, the security. We must nip it in the bud. Violence does not come as an action. It starts as a thought. It comes in words before it translates to action. So we must begin to check leaders who are looking as if they are unchecked. We must begin to look at leaders who are moving around when campaign has not even started and call such leaders to order. There is no reason President Ahmed Tinubu cannot call his minister to order. Nwike is becoming a terrible nuisance in the political system in Rivers State, creating a very high level of toxicity that may become an inflammatory point for every Rivers person, because Rivers State must be liberated and people will contend with him. And of course, if we don't play by the rules and he doesn't play by the rules, you can tell me what the aftermath of such confrontations will be.
Definitely, and we pray it doesn't come to that. Well, Dr. Leloonu Nwibubasa, former Rivers State Commissioner for Employment Generation and Empowerment.
Please, sorry. Please, sorry, we won't keep it at prayer. It is important that we don't use we pray. We need concrete actions, not prayers. We need concrete actions. The word prayer should not come from serious actors like us in the media and in the polity. Actions must be taken. It must be followed through. It shouldn't be by prayer. Prayer will not work this alone.
Definitely, we agree with you. Thank you so much, Dr. Leloonu Nwibubasa, former Rivers State Commissioner for Employment Generation and Empowerment, for joining us on The Morning Show.